I've spent around 30 hours playing RuneScape Dragonwilds since its release, and during that time I've developed a pretty strong grasp of the game. So I thought now would be a great time to share what I've learned to help you get the most out of your own experience and avoid some of the early mistakes that I made. To keep the videos somewhat organised, I've split the tips into 7 categories ranging from base building to combat, with each category starting with more beginner friendly advice and gradually progressing into more advanced tips if there are any. Before we get started, I want to say that I will do my best to avoid spoilers, especially those which are story related. However, given that this is a tips video, it's pretty likely that you'll be exposed to at least some parts of the game which you were otherwise unaware of. With all that said, here are 40 tips I wish I'd known sooner in RuneScape Dragonwilds. The first tip is that it's not always worth cooking higher quality foods. So for example, if I use 2 potatoes to make a baked potato and 2 cabbages to make a fried cabbage, then each will give me 20 sustenance for a total of 40 sustenance. However, if I was to combine these ingredients into one recipe and make vegetable soup, you'd expect that I would receive at least 40 sustenance or possibly even more, since this is technically a higher tier food. But instead, if I eat this vegetable soup, you'll see that in the bottom left of the screen, my sustenance only actually increases by 30. So even though I used the exact same ingredients, I actually lost a total of 10 sustenance from making vegetable soup rather than eating these items individually. So it seems that the only real advantage of higher quality foods is that they take less time to consume overall and take up less space in your inventory. Another tip is that some foods also provide a status effect in addition to providing sustenance. The earliest encounter of this is likely to be grilled mushrooms, which can be made by cooking 2 bitter cap mushrooms found in the swamp, and this will provide you with an increased resistance to poison for a set period of time. There are other foods which can provide you with different status effects, but I won't mention them here in order to reduce the amount of spoilers in this video. However, it is something to be aware of if you're finding certain areas or enemies particularly challenging. There may be some status effects that you can do to alleviate some of that difficulty. Next up is to make an effort to count exact quantities of food. And what I mean by this is that when cooking multiple ingredient recipes, it can be tempting just to throw in whatever quantity of those ingredients that you're currently holding. However, what you'll notice is that once the first ingredient runs out, if there's still fuel in the workstation and the remaining ingredients can still form a recipe, then it will continue to cook the remaining ingredients into a food which you may not necessarily want. If this happens, you end up wasting those ingredients and then having to gather more for next time. So instead, you should just make the effort to count the exact number of each ingredient to save you effort in the long run. One tip that you might not know is that you can use dirty water when making infused drinks. Now, this is one of those things which, depending on how you first discovered the recipe, you may already know this. But if you did first discover infused drinks using clean water, then you may think that it's always required to be this way. But actually, using dirty water directly instead of clean water will use the same amount of ingredients overall, but it will save you the additional processing step from dirty water to clean water, and save you any materials that you would have used for the fuel. My last food and drink related tip is that you can combine the bark to bone spell with the bones to peaches spell for an easy food source either around your base or on the go if you happen to run out of food. Now, peaches are a low sustenance food, so each one will only provide 20 sustenance, but since both trees and rune essence can be found pretty much in abundance, it's really easy to farm these as required. All you have to do is walk up to any random tree, use the bark to bone spell, and then when you see the materials drop on the ground, use the bones to peaches spell to turn them into peaches. Pretty self-explanatory. The first tip I've got in gathering is that you can actually just hit down these rune essence. Now, I know that this has already been covered, but some people won't have seen it. You can just shoot down these rune essence, and doing it this way is going to yield you more rune essence per node that you find. So it's definitely worth it. And then from here, you can obviously just mine it. It's worth noting, if you are going to shoot the rune essence down, you could swap out your decent arrows for cheaper arrows. I don't actually have any on me right now, but I'm using bronze currently. I could put that to like fang arrows, for example, because you don't need to do a certain amount of damage, you just need to hit them. It's the same if you're using mage. Maybe you want to use a rune that you have more of. I only have 24 air runes, maybe I want to use fire rune. I can then go and shoot down the rune essence that way. Of course, when they're on the ground, you should be using your raw explosion in order to mine these. Pretty simple stuff, but something that if you've not been doing it, maybe you don't realise how overpowered it is. On the same sort of note, we're going to use astral projection to chop down trees. And this is going to make gathering wood so much easier. Once they've fallen, hopefully you get a little situation where they all sort of overlap like this. And then you can go back in with Splinter, and rather than chopping up this whole tree into individual pieces, we can just gather all the logs quickly like that. Another great way to get ashwood really quickly is by harvesting these thorny vines. So this one's a bit of a smaller one, so you don't get as much here, but you will find larger areas covered by thorny vines around in the world. And these are going to respawn over time, so you can just come in and really simply harvest them, 2 little clicks of that for 15 logs. And there are bigger ones which will yield a lot more logs as well, so it's a different way that you could get some more ash logs if you're struggling and you don't want to waste or commit too much time to it. Okay, so if you're anything like me and a few other people that I've spoken to, when you get into a new area or a certain place, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but you may struggle to find the materials that you know are in this area, or you believe to be in this area. What you can actually do is go into your spells and use the detect ore and clay spell. So if I assign that to my spell wheel, I can go and grab it, use it, and you'll see here there's different coloured orbs and they're all going off in different directions. Okay, so I can see that there's some around here, something orange. There's another white thing up here. So there's obviously different areas. There's some here as well, so if I happen to be closer to these ones, let's use it again, you'll see these are lighting up and you can actually see them through walls. So you know that this is an orange one. I'm not going to share what it is, but there's also a white one over that direction. And you can see here there's a big beam of light coming down. So I could follow that or go over to that and I'll be able to find the different materials that I need. Actually, I realise now that I do kind of have to show this one because this is the earliest node in the game, which this tip will actually be applicable to. So I won't show any more, but I will show this one. Once you've used Rock Explosion on your nodes, what you want to make sure is that you get all of the material that you want from it. So you can see here there's technically 2 nodes. There's a copper ore node on the left and a copper ore node on the right. So I've used Rock Explosion on this, and you can see that when I hover over this one on the left, it says depleted underneath. When I hover over the one on the right, it doesn't. You can see here I've still got a little bit on the end there. So what you want to do is make sure that you're getting all of the material that you need from each individual node, and that's going to save you a lot of time in the long run with gathering your materials. So moving on to the building tips now, what I recommend is that you build your base in a tier 1 area. Now this location is not actually a tier 1 area. I've decided to build this in Bramblemead Valley, so down here, and I think this is a tier 2 area. So tier 2 areas and anything above are prone to the dragon attacks and also the raids. So what I recommend is building your base down in Temple Woods, which is a level 1 tier area, and you will not get any dragon attacks or raids down there. So definitely worthwhile doing, and I think actually I'm going to be relocating down here myself. So if you've played this game, you'll know that maintaining your thirst and sustenance is quite a big deal. So what I recommend is building your base next to a water source. Now obviously having water nearby is going to save you a lot of time because you're going to need to be gathering a lot of it as you progress through the game. But on top of that, you want to be looking for areas which also provide other things. I chose this area because there's some red berry bushes around, and also there's a big stack of potatoes just outside my front door. So I knew that if I was ever in need of some sort of easy foods, I could just pick these up and get them cooked up. So onto actually the base building itself. When you come into your building, you'll notice that these 2 little areas pop up here. You've got a toggle repair mode and a ghost mode. So if I click toggle repair mode, I can hover over my structure and I can see all of this is at 100% health. So that means that it's pretty much as strong as it can be. However, if it sustains some damage from a raid, for example, then this damage is going to go down. And even if it doesn't break, it's going to be weaker for the next time. So if you have been aware of enemies sort of knocking at your door or banging on the walls or roof, just be aware that they could be weakened for next time. Toggle mode is also really good for deleting pieces, because if you try and do it with a piece in your hand, sometimes you can't always see where you're actually aiming at. So I always recommend using the toggle repair mode in order to delete pieces as well. So you can actually delete what you want to delete instead of accidentally deleting something else. Next up we have ghost mode. Now this is sort of basically like a blueprint mode. You can sort of plan out your structure and see how it's going to fit in the world without actually building it and then having to delete it. So you can place out foundations, for example, and see if you want a 2x3 but you didn't want it to collide with this tree. You can say, okay, that looks good there. So I can then come out of toggle mode and I can just go around and build all these pieces if I want to. So there we go, I can build that. And that's going to save you a little bit of time building and deleting things if they don't work out. Next up, we have building stability. Now, I don't know if you've played any other survival craft games, but some other games make use of a similar system where when you are planning to build on them, they will be assigned a colour. So green on this game means it's pretty much as strong as it can be. It's at the floor level, it's touching the foundations. And as you start to work up, you're going to see that these pieces, they'll go to yellow, and then eventually they'll reach red, and red basically means that you can't be placed because it's unstable. One way to combat this in this game is by using the beams and pillars. Now, beams and pillars will allow you to build higher than just the regular wall pieces, for example. So if you're struggling to build a structure as high as you want it to be, or there's some areas of instability, what you want to do is come in and either place these beams sort of in the walls, or you can sort of go inside and maybe you could have a sort of vertical beam in the center of the building going up and supporting the roof. Something like that would probably work quite well. My structure doesn't need it, so I'm going to take this out, but it's just to make you aware that the beams and pillars are more stable. You can build higher using them than you can with the regular pieces, so something to bear in mind. And I can actually demonstrate that whilst using the Eye of Oculus. If you're not aware of the Eye of Oculus, it's a spell that you can use which really helps with the building process. Basically allows you to move away from your character and sort of have a free camera to build. And I'm going to basically demonstrate the principles behind stability really quickly here. We've got 6 pieces there, and then it starts to get unstable. So let's try the same thing with the walls just to prove my point. If I want to have a standard wall, make sure it's touching the floor. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's only 4 high. So you can see we get that much higher with the beams, and then not only that, it can actually support these elements even more so than these ones here. Okay, so moving on to some crafting tips now. Once you unlock the kiln, you can place in some logs in here, and you'll get a 1-to-1 ratio for logs to charcoal. It says here, produced by burning wood in the kiln, charcoal is a very efficient fuel. So you can go ahead, make yourself some charcoal, and then if you use that on your regular cooking stations, then what you'll realise is that it actually cooks at a faster rate than wood, for example. You see it's quite quick to do this with the charcoal. If I place some wood in here and do a potato, for example, let's just do 1. You can see it takes a lot longer to cook. So yeah, charcoal is definitely an option, and since it just uses the kiln, doesn't use any other materials, it's just a 1-to-1 trade. Definitely recommend using up some of your wood for charcoal for things like that. Another thing you could do to accelerate the process, again using these spells, you use the superheat spell on any fire-based workstation. You can see it's just going to start throwing them out. It's going so quick. So like I said, that's going to work on like your furnace and things, for example, your kiln, and basically anything that's fire-based. So definitely worth keeping that in mind. I've used it quite a few times when I've came back with new ore and I want to smelt it quite quickly, and it's definitely worth it. Okay, so I just had to stop and deal with the raids, but that leads us on quite nicely to my next tip, and that is using your spells to repair materials. So I've got my Abyssal Whip here. I've just dropped it on the floor because it's pretty much nearly damaged, and it's actually a lot of materials to replace this Abyssal Whip because it's quite a high tier item in the game. However, what I can do instead is use Magical Mending, and I can basically just use that on the Abyssal Whip, and I can place down as many items in that spell as I want. Just remember obviously to pick them all back up again, and it's going to repair them to varying degrees of durability just depending on how high tier the weapon is itself. So we have one more tip left in crafting, and that's going to be making use of the lumber storage next to the sawmill. So when I first had the sawmill, it didn't yet have a lumber storage, and what I realised is that all the planks in this position were falling off the porch here and kind of just not going anywhere. And I decided to create one of these lumber storages next to it. What I found was that actually the produce from the sawmill was just going directly into here rather than hitting the floor. So you'll see, we should see a change in number here on the planks. So it's going from 36, and hopefully that should increase whenever the next plank is produced. So now you see it's 38. So yeah, definitely make use of this, it's really useful just having it sort of self-store for you. So I just place all my wood in here now. It's definitely worthwhile doing, and it's something that I imagine they may incorporate in other forms other than just lumber at different stages of the game, so keep that in mind for future updates as well. So moving on to exploration tips now, the first thing I want to mention is that you should always be trying to have your gear level at least the same level as the area you're in, or exceeding it ideally. You can check your own gear level by opening your inventory, looking at your armor, and this little number here, 4, is my gear level at the moment. When you're crafting your items, you can also see the armor level, so you can see we've got a bronze logging axe here is level 3, and also every area in the game is also going to have an associated level. So if I take my teleportation down to the Whispering Swamp, for example, if I land in here, it's going to come up Whispering Swamp, power level 2. Okay, well my power level is 4, so I know that I should be more or less fine in this area. If you get into a new area and your gear level is actually less than the area level, then your first priority should be upgrading your gear to at least the same level as the area you're moving into. It's a really important thing, but something that you could sort of skip over in other games. RuneScape Dragonwilds is not like that. If you do not have the appropriate gear going into an area, you're going to have a really rough time. The next thing I want to talk about is fast travel, which we've just seen a little bit of there, and it comes in the form of these lodestones. Now, the materials that you need for these lodestones are going to be based in points of interest, so actually it's going to be in these vaults here. I don't want to mention too much, but that's where you're going to find them. But when you do get the materials and you've crafted your first lodestone here, you're going to want to try and prioritize getting enough materials to have another lodestone. And once you've got those materials, you're going to want to keep them in your inventory at all times when you're exploring, so that whenever you get to a new area, instead of losing all your progress to come all the way back, you can simply place down a lodestone, and then that's going to be like your starting point for going forward. You can then spawn back into that, visit back to your house, get some more foods, you know, repair your armor, whatever it may be, and then start off exactly where you left off. And that's going to save you a lot of time. Next up, we've got the personal chest. Now, I actually haven't unlocked this, but I have seen some from other creators, and I thought it would be worthwhile mentioning because it's something I'm going to be making use of very shortly. This is a sort of more advanced tip, I guess, because it does require construction level 40. However, it works basically like any other spell, and what that's going to allow you to do is have access to a chest or more storage whenever you need it through the use of a spell. So that's the kind of place that you can have all the materials required in order to place a lodestone in. You can have some additional food, and you know, you can use that to basically quick bank all of the new materials that you might be gathering if you, for example, hit your carry capacity. Something you should definitely be doing when you're exploring as well is making use of the pins on the maps. So you can right click to set and unset markers. You can say, you know, I've got a house here or a shelter here or whatever it may be. Basically just mark points of interest for yourself so that you can go back to them at a later date. Now, I don't want to share too much because I do have other ones, other areas of the map. I don't use this as much as I need to because I've been playing it quite a lot, so I actually just remember off the top of my head. But for those of you who don't, you know, have the time to dedicate 4 or 5 hours a day into this like I currently am, then you definitely want to be making use of this so you can sort of pick up where you left off the next time you come in. So here I've got some trees marked. These are just oak trees, so I know I could do a little run of oak trees down here and get some oak if I needed to. My next piece of advice is exploratory, but it's also quite general as well. However, on your map you see that there's sort of all these little points of interest, and what I would say is, like, don't just follow the primary quest Dragon Slayer, go out and explore some of these points of interest, because there are secondary quests in this game. There's other things going on, and without giving too much away, you want to be exploring these places at different times of the day. You know, some places might change at different times of the day and spark new opportunities that, you know, a certain other time of the day wouldn't, for example. So something worth bearing in mind. But yeah, there's definitely more to this game than just the primary quest. So even though it's still in early access at the moment, definitely go and check out some of these other points of interest. There is some definitely interesting stuff going on. And last but not least is just making use of your wind step ability. So this is a ability that allows you to reach heights which are too high up. Lets you sort of have superhuman jump, but it also slows your descent. So you can use that both ways. Something that you maybe skip past when you first unlock it because it's unlocked quite early, and well, at least I didn't really have a purpose for it that early. And then by the time I did have a purpose for it, I'd kind of forgotten about it. So I'm trying to remind you about it. It can be quite important for exploratory purposes. So just bear it in the back of your mind that it's an option and it's there. And that's what it does. Okay, so I do have some sort of general tips before I get onto the combat related ones. And the first one is probably going to come as no surprise because of how much I've been speaking about spells. But you really want to keep all of your runes at quite a high level for when you're exploring, because they're so useful. They're really useful at gathering, fighting, just generally exploring, but also fast travel and things like that. So always make sure that you've got a good stack of runes behind you, because at the moment they're also really easy to craft as well. You don't need any individual requirements for different runes. All you need is rune essence. Rune essence can be harvested from these rune essence nodes, but another great way to come across rune essence is by opening up all of these goblin packs that you no doubt have from all of the raids that you've been getting and all the goblins you've been killing. So we could take out, say, 5 here, and rather just clicking one and waiting for it to come down, okay, click another one. What you can do is split all these up, and this is going to be a much more relaxing way or chill way to open all these boxes. And you could basically just click them all, queue them all up, and then just have it sort of automatically do it in the background. You can split them up as much as you feel like you want to, more or less than what I've just done there, but it's a lot less tedious than individually clicking, waiting, clicking, waiting. And as you can see, my inventory is absolutely filling up with rune essence here, so you shouldn't have any problem getting rune essence. And it's worth noting, it's not just goblin packs that allow you to queue tasks, it's basically anything in your inventory. So if I want to drink 2 dirty waters, and then a weak healing potion, and then a peach, you can see I just queue them all up and they just go one by one in the order that I selected them. The next tip is discussing debuffs. So if I just collect some dirty water, you're kind of encouraged at the start of the game not to drink dirty water, and I kind of stuck to that until I realised that when you drink it, nothing really happens. You can see in the bottom left, your hydration goes up. If I keep drinking this, all that's going to happen is your hydration goes up, and you're also going to have this little bar appear here. So whilst this bar's here, nothing's actually bad that's happening to your character, so you can continue to drink dirty water all you want, but the bar is going to start to sort of fill, and as it approaches that upper limit, you might get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So you can see it hit the top here, and I'm now toxified, losing 10 HP per second. So obviously not ideal, but it's worth noting that that's how debuffs work, because you can still get away with doing things in moderation as long as you're not actually getting to that limit. The same thing applies when you're stood in the poison spit from the dragon, for example. You can be in it for a little while and nothing's really going to happen, but if you watch that bar in the bottom left of your screen, if that hits the 100% of that bar, then that's when you're going to start to have negative effects. My next tip is going to be to use items to help you carry additional weight. So there are items in this game which will help you to increase your carry weight. I'm going to show you where this one item in particular is, because it's right at the start of the game, and unless you found it in that one instance, you're probably not going to find it unless you go back. So if you're not interested in that, just skip ahead like a minute, make sure you take a look at the numbers on the screen and go to the next tip. So the item I'm talking about is the leggings of lightness, and they're actually found right at the start of the game in a recipe sheet in a chest. So these items are going to allow you to increase your carry weight by plus 50, so your total carry weight is normally only 400. I believe you can go up to 415 if you're encumbered. This is going to obviously add 50 onto those numbers. So in order to find this, you're going to need to go to the windmill in Temple Woods, and there's actually going to be a chest right on top of that. Now, I'm not going to show you exactly how to get it, but you can basically go there. Right on top of the windmill, there will be a chest, and if you simply use your wind step to jump up there, then you're going to open it up and get the recipe for those trousers. And they're definitely worth it if you're planning to sort of move bases a lot, or you just want to go out and do like a rune essence run, for example, and you want to be able to carry more weight, because often with things like that, it's the weight that slows you down, not the inventory slots. So yeah, bear that in mind and go and pick yourself up those leggings if that's an item that you want to have. The last general tip that I have, and this is probably one of the most valuable tips out of the whole lot, so if you are still watching and you're liking these tips, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And this tip is going to be to make use of your journal. So In your journal, you're going to see all of the recipes, the knowledge that you've sort of picked up from playing the game, all the lore pages and things like that. But the most valuable piece in the journal, in my opinion, is in this world tab. So in this world tab, it's going to tell you all about the factions, the fauna, flora, resources, and all of these things are going to be in here depending on when you've discovered them. The most valuable part is this factions area here. So if I go on to, say, Goblin Warrior, I can have a look at this mob and I can see exactly what it's weak to. So it says here it's weak to magic, specifically air, and it's resistant to ranged. So obviously that's something that I want to consider if I'm, having a little bit of difficulty with that mob in particular. And I believe that these unlock after killing them or just discovering them for the first time. So you can come in here and have a read. There's a few other ones. So like this, if we go into a Guru Berserker, who's, one of the tiers above Goblin, but still quite early in the game. Have a little look at that. Oh, I can see here that they're actually weak to fire. So that's great. I can, get myself a magic staff, put on some fire runes and attack it with fire. And just sort of on that note, I will show you that if you are using mage, you can just come into your runes and you can see that the oak battle staff, for example, has this little symbol above the fire runes and the air runes, and you can cycle between them as you want to, and you can actually drag them into hotkeys if you need to, but I think that having them just here is normally enough. And that sort of naturally transitions us into the combat tips. So that was going to be a tip for later on, but I've already closed it now, so I'll just cover the other ones. Earlier I spoke about your combat gear and the area level. So at some points you're going to have to go into areas which are beyond your current gear level in order to get the items from that area in order to improve your gear. One way you can bridge that gap is again by using spells. So if you're using a melee weapon, you're going to have access to all of these combat spells such as enchant your weapon with fire. Now this is something that's really useful. Obviously it only lasts a certain amount of time, but if I use that on my whip here, you're going to see it's going to light up with fire, and I'm going to get a little indicator right in front of my screen, which is basically a timer which goes down. That's going to give me a little bit of elemental damage. It's going to buff my damage for the hits, and it's something that can bridge the gap sort of temporarily, or if you're in like a boss fight or you're struggling with a certain enemy type and you just need to feel like you need a little bit more damage. That's something that can help you out. So bear that in mind if you are finding a challenge with the combat in this game. Next up, for combat, I just want to speak about the environment in general. It's kind of a general tip, but obviously you can use the environment to your advantage. You can, stand up here and sort of manipulate the enemies, use your wind step to jump into areas where maybe they can't reach, or even just something as simple as when you're getting attacked in your base, just moving to the other side of a pond like this, jumping over, having the enemies wade through the water, and this could actually be perfect timing to show this off here. So I've killed all the other ones, I've just got this one goblin left, and you can see it takes him a little bit of time to come through the water and to attack me. So if I had a ranged weapon, I could really use this to my advantage, this sort of slowed down timing when he's coming through. Okay, he's having to wade through there. It just buys me a little bit more time in order to fight or heal or drink a potion, whatever it may be. Another thing in combat, what you might realize is that your armor, you seem to sort of make it and you put it on and you have a nice purple bar down in the center of your screen down here. Now you can see here mine's is currently saying 0 out of 75, so I've obviously taken a little bit of damage. And this is basically extra life that your armor can provide you on top of the resistance stats that your armor is providing you. So in order to refill this back up, you need to come to your rune altar with some rune essence and stone, I believe. Let's go ahead and grab some of that. And then you can go ahead and make yourself some ward stones. So let's make just one of them for now. And then once you come into your inventory and use one of these up, you'll see I've now moved it up to 30 over 75. But something just bear in mind with this is it does actually have some toxicity as well. So if you already have been drinking dirty water or something else, this might sort of set you over the edge. So just be aware of that. This is something which comes with aspects of a debuff whilst also delivering something quite positive too. So now that we're on the topic of armor, let's start speaking about set bonuses. So you may have already seen when you're crafting, your sets that you have these set bonuses. So it says here, if you have one piece of the 3, you get stealth speed plus 40. If you have all 3, you get weak point damage plus the other 2, for example. However, maybe you don't really have a good shot, and you're not often hitting weak point damages when you're ranged because you like to aim for the body, and that's more of a sure shot for you, for example. Then maybe you don't need weak point damage. Maybe you just want to be able to fire off more shots than you would need to if you were able to hit the weak point every time. So then maybe the set bonus isn't so great for you to use. Maybe you would want to use something like hard leather body and the chaps so that you can get the ranged attack stamina cost minus 33%. But then you've also got like a wizard hat, for example, which is a minus 50% stamina regen delay. So having a stamina regen delay reduction and also stamina cost reduction, you could probably shoot off quite a lot of arrows in a small period of time using a sort of mixed armor set like those 3. And also, whilst we're just on the topic of this, I like to choose my armor depending on what I feel like I'm likely to get hit by. So when I'm in combat, if it's melee combat, then I think that normally I can either block or parry any melee attacks. But something that I often get caught out by is the ranged attacks from a ranger which is quite far away, that typically has very good accuracy and hits almost all the time. So because of that, I've decided to opt for the ranged armor because it has a higher ranged defense. So this means that I'm going to be taking less damage, presumably, from any ranged attacks. And this is something that I find that I get hit from quite a lot, and that's why I've opted for my armor. Obviously, that's going to be personal preference, but that's the way it works in this game. It doesn't work exactly the way that OSRS works, and that might help you progress through the game a little bit easier and make it a little bit easier for you. And last but not least, I just want to touch on the fact that some combat items like this whip have special attacks, and it's definitely worth making use of them because they can have some powerful effects. This one for the whip, for example, stuns opponents, and then I can just get in a few easy hits and sort of do a lot of damage without really any risk to myself. If you made it this far in the video, you now know 40 tips which I wish I'd known sooner. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, please do leave a like in return and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already.